What I would recommend is to get a piece of paper and a pen and let me show you some examples of the 24-70 2.8 G Master compared to a Canon 24-70 2.8 L2 adapted with a Metabones 4 adapter on an Alpha 7R2 camera body. There's so many things to remember. So I wanted to do some qualitative tests, and I think it's most convincing to the viewer when I show you something and let you come to your own conclusions. Several different things we're going to look at. Number one is bokeh. This is at 70 millimeters, 2.8, pulled out of focus. The subject is a candle, and you'll notice immediately that the size of the bokeh circles are different, even though I was shooting from the same position. Number two, let's take a look at lens flare. And something that I noticed about the lenses is that they flare differently at different focal lengths and apertures, but this is a pretty close side-by-side comparison in terms of their quality. Next, let's take a look at wide-angle distortion at 24 millimeters. You probably noticed that one of the lenses shoots a little bit wider than the other. And in the same image, look in the corner to see if you can tell a difference for the fourth test, which is vignetting. Vignetting is typically a darkening in the corners that we see when shooting at wide-angle focal lengths. Number 5, chromatic aberration. For those of you that may not know, chromatic aberration is a color fringing. You'll see it as a purple to greenish, sometimes it's blue and yellow in areas of high contrast. So on these power lines, you're going to see it on the very edges, a little bit of purple, a little bit of green, both at 2.8 and f8, which is our number 6. For my lens sharpness test, I took a picture of a brick wall at different focal lengths, 24 millimeters and 50 millimeters, and different apertures, 2.8, f4, and f8. I was a little reluctant to publish it on YouTube because there's compression, but I do think there's enough data here that you can kind of see what's going on. What I really want to do is share some files through a link on my blog so you guys can download them and judge for yourself. But one of these lenses tends to be sharper in the center and the other tends to be sharper in the corners. See if you can notice a difference at 2.8, f4, or f8. Now, it's important to note that lenses have variations from copy to copy, and the real way to test lenses is to get like 50 of them, test them in a lab, and average out the scores. However, I do think the data I'm presenting has some valuable information if you're interested in these two lenses. I also performed a low light focusing test with either the G Master or the L2 using a Metabones adapter in the low light focusing test, and the G Master was significantly faster. You will definitely notice a difference. I know many of you are probably interested in how the G Master does for sports shooting, and I would definitely recommend checking out the epic shootout I published last week. Although it was on an Alpha 6300, the focusing systems on that camera are really good. Unfortunately, you will not have a lot of success in terms of accuracy if you try to shoot with an adapted lens on a Sony body for sports shooting. So, are you ready for the scores? Here they are. I'm very careful to make sure that the images in the tests and the answers are correct. Some of you have challenged me in the past on that. We triple check them. These are the scores, and hopefully this is enough for you to come to your own conclusions. If I personally were going to summarize, it would be that the Canon L2 has an advantage for bokeh. It shoots wider, and I also believe that it is consistently sharper in the middle, just by a teeny bit. To summarize what I'm seeing in the G Master is that it appears to have less chromatic aberration at wider apertures, less vignetting at wider focal lengths. I personally like the lens flare more in the G Master, and from what I've seen, it appears to be sharper in the corners, meaning that it is more consistently sharp throughout the frame. It is also definitely the lens you are going to want if you have a need for speed in low light focusing or for sport shooting. I'm really impressed with the G Master, but let's address some of the questions that you guys have in terms of coming from a Canon and shooting with a Sony. Maybe you have a Canon body and a Sony body, an E-mount body in your bag, and you're wondering whether or not it's time to get rid of this. My advice to you would be is that you're going to get the G Master under two situations. Number one, you're a professional, or number two, you have a need for speed. Eye autofocus does not work with non-native lenses, at least the ones that I've tested with this Metabones adapter. You lose that eye autofocus, so if you're a portrait photographer, there's a lot of sense in terms of shooting weddings or portraits with the G Master, because you can just hit that eye autofocus and get the focus lock. If you have a Canon body still that you use and is in your camera bag, and you can use that for sports and fast moving subjects, it kind of makes more sense to go with the L2 Metabones 4 adapter. And then when you want to do landscapes or maybe manual focusing on your videos on your Sony, then you adapt it over. And that's what I've been doing for like 6 months. This is the lens I would have in my camera bag. I'd bring the adapter. Sometimes I'd shoot Canon, sometimes I'd shoot Sony. When you put the Metabones adapter on the Canon, they basically become almost identical in size. 950 grams compared to 886. Without the adapter, you're looking at just over 800 grams on the Canon. Cost on the G Master is $2,200. You can find the L2 now for about $1,800. I think what we're seeing is representative of the best lenses from either company. But interestingly about the G Master is I don't think Sony has really made a full frame camera that exploits this to its full advantage. I have a feeling it's coming, but if you look at the Epic Shootout that I did last week, I used it on an Alpha 6300. That's an APS-C sized sensor. It did really, really well. This is really made and designed for a full frame. A7R2, it can shoot sports, but it runs into a problem when you start panning or when you fill the buffer up. It's not really a great sports shooting camera. So the impression that I have is we haven't seen a full frame Sony camera that's really going to take advantage of this. So I hope that really helps you guys in terms of what I'm seeing in terms of quality between the G Master and the L2. Hopefully I've given you enough data to come to your own conclusions about what you think about these lenses. Try to always present data and why I think a certain way about something, but I always know there's people who disagree with me. If you have suggestions in terms of what I can do to improve the lens comparisons, definitely please let me know. In any event, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.